Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to let everyone get settled in, and then Wendy's going to go over some housekeeping items, and then we'll start the presentation. Oh, I'm seeing so many familiar names and some new names too. Hi, Gina. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Irene.
Yeah, turn my camera on, Amber. Somebody has to let me do that. But good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Gina.
Okay.
Same here. It's not letting me turn mine on.
It
Oh,
should
okay.
be.
Oh, and Jessica
Zoom is-
too.
Yeah, Zoom is being weird today. Just saying.
Well, the tech
Says
host
we
is
can't
being
turn it
weird.
on because it's being recorded. So that might be a set.
No,
That's
no,
what it
it's
told me.
Oh,
It's okay.
Allison and Gina, I can see you. Oh, awesome. Yay. Hopefully we don't have a Zoom outage like we had a social media outage earlier this week, right? Know what we do at this point. So as everyone's getting settled in, go ahead and say hi in the chat. Let us know your name and where you're joining us from today.
And while everyone does that, I'll just go through some housekeeping items as everyone gets in. I think we're all very used to Zoom by now, but just in case. My name is Wendy, and I am a marketing specialist for Maddie's Fund. We are very excited to be hosting our second huddle for the Open Arms Challenge. The challenge kicks off on November 22nd, and we're encouraging animal shelters and rescue organizations to pilot new approaches that open doors to new adopters and volunteers and welcome your entire community. We have 323 organizations signed up to participate, which is an all-time high, and we are partnering with 16 national organizations. We have $200,000 in grants that will be awarded to participants who complete the challenge, and we cannot wait to see what you do. Today's presentation will include 20 minutes of presentation by our two speakers, followed by time for your live Q&A. Before we get started, a few housekeeping. We've muted your microphone so that everyone can hear our speakers. Once their presentation has concluded, we'll open the Q&A session. There are two ways that you can ask questions, either by raising your hand or putting it in the chat at any time, and we'll either call on you or read the questions after the presentation is completed. And we'll also be recording this session. It will be posted to our Open Arms Challenge group on Maddie's Pet Forum, should you wish to view it again or share it with a friend. Today, our moderator is Amber Edie of Maddie's Fund. She'll be introducing our presenters and moderate the Q&A. Today, we will be talking about how you and your organization can be open to new ideas. Take it away, Amber.
Thanks so much, Wendy. And I just wanted to add to that, I'm joined by Gina Knepp from Michelson Found Animals, who is also one of our sponsors for this challenge. So Gina, I'm happy to have you on, and would love to also hear from you and just help moderate as we've been doing in the past. So thanks, Gina, for joining us today too. And all right, everyone, we all know this. Change, even if it's positive, is really, really hard. On a personal note, I am in the middle of moving out of San Francisco to the suburbs, and I'm very excited. This is like a huge new chapter for me and my partner, but it's hard. I mean, I'm surrounded by boxes and it's a new environment and it's really hard. So on a personal level, it's hard. And on an institutional level, it can be even harder. Letting go of old ideas can open up your organization to new opportunities and processes that are equitable and inclusive, but it doesn't mean it's easy. So today I'm so excited to be joined by Allison Cardona, the Deputy Director of the County of Los Angeles Animal Care and Control. She oversees 2 full-service animal care centers, a communication center, adoptions, behavior, enrichment, and volunteer programs. And if that wasn't enough, Allison also serves as liaison to the county's homeless initiative, ensuring that people who are experiencing homelessness have options and resources for their pets. So welcome, Allison. Thank you so much for joining us. We're also joined by Alex Tanner of Pets for Life K9s. In 2014, Alex helped implement the Paws for Life prison program at the California State Prison, Los Angeles County, and Lancaster, California. The program was originally designed to be a simple dog training program for incarcerated men, the first of its kind at a maximum security prison. And wow, Alex, what an accomplishment. Under her leadership, Paws for Life Rescue continues to expand its services to first responders and victims of violent crimes in conjunction with getting animals out of California's overpopulated shelter system. So both of our speakers today have done amazing things and have had to overcome change, I'm sure, with their organizations. So Alex, you are unmuted, which is great. Allison, you are still muted. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you both if you had anything prepared. Allison, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thank you so much. You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to Maddie's Fund for doing this and for creating this space and for this Open Arms Challenge. My name is Allison. My pronouns are she, her. And for those, if anyone's visually impaired, I'm a light-skinned Latina woman. I have curly mid-length hair. I'm wearing a green and blue shirt, and I'm sitting in an office.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Allison, but I love this. Can we just talk about the inclusivity that you just did in the first 10 seconds that you spoke? And we're going to do this now, Wendy, Allison, Maddie's Fund team. Let's all start these ways to include everyone who might have, differences in their scene and sharing our pronouns too. Thank you, Allison. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, not at all. Thank you. And it's just an honor to be here. I've worked with Los Angeles County for 4.5 years. And prior to that, I spent 14 years with the ASPCA. When I was thinking about letting go of old ideas, I wanted to start first with myself. I was thinking about having spent now 20 plus years in animal welfare. I also started before I worked for the ASPCA volunteering, and I was doing trap, neuter, return on my own time. So thinking of my own journey, and I was talking with a colleague the other day, and I was trained in New York City by a group of really hardcore rescue adoption people who did home checks, who really wanted basically like an essay to know why you wanted to adopt. And that's the way I was raised in animal welfare. And I remember my own first experiences. This is so vivid in my mind. I think it was like 2003. And I was an adoptions counselor, and someone came in and I was interacting with them. And I had just a full idea of what their story was, by the way they were dressed. And I smelled alcohol on their breath.
Ouch.
And I decided, I was like, this person cannot adopt. They cannot adopt. And I remember that day, and I was getting a lot of positive reinforcement from that. But luckily, my boss took me into the back and was like, what's going on with you?
Sophia.
Ooh, I think somebody's unmuted. And I was like, but they're drunk, they're drinking. This is not a good home. And she was like, what are you talking about? Just so she's had a couple of drinks. We don't know what her life's about. Just let this person take this animal home. But I guess I share this because that's really where I started, and it was ingrained in me. And it's really been a journey for me. And I think I probably came to animal welfare because I thought I really wanted to work with animals. And I learned very quickly, that was probably within the first 2 weeks of starting, it was about working with people. And I didn't have a name for it then, but I understand now that I also had a lot of bias, and I still have a lot of bias. And, I've done a lot of work over the years, but it really, letting go of old ideas is tough. And even though today I feel very differently, I see when old biases pop up, or even when I'm like, I know this person's story. I know because with a flash of just looking at them, the way they're dressed, and 100% of the time I'm wrong, which is really amazing to me. So yeah, I wanted to share first about my personal journey, but I also wanted to say, working for Los Angeles County, I think the benefit that we have is that we're also exposed to a larger county system. And we're in an incredibly diverse county. And something that I would say we've really worked on is looking at our policies. Because it's one thing to say open arms, right? We're going to be inclusive, we're going to welcome people, but what are the policies and practices that may have unintended consequences and may unintentionally, but still be quite discriminatory and excluding people? And I'll give a short example. So we really started looking at our adoption practices and we said, are these serving us? Who are we excluding? Who are they benefiting? And what impact are they having on the animals? And one of the policies that we looked at was we had adoption screening and interviews for certain breeds of dogs. So anything that was a pit bull, a Rottweiler, it was a long list. And some of it seemed kind of arbitrary about who was on the list and who wasn't. And so we did these screening interviews and it was a pass-fail type of system. So we really got curious about it more than anything. How many animals are we actually adopting out as a result of this? How many are not getting adopted out? Are we just turning people away? So we did a couple of things. We did a survey of our staff to learn also how they were trained to do these interviews. And we also looked at our behavior assessments. But the reason I bring this up is because what we found out was it was really rooted in bias and not intentionally necessarily, but there were these ideas of what a good home was, you know, a fenced in yard, owning a home, spending a lot of time at home and being able to devote time, right? But it's like, I work, can I afford to own a home? I just bought a home this past year. Before that, I always rented. I always lived in apartments. So who are we excluding from adopting these bully breed and other type of dogs? So we really, and I have limited time, but we really took a hard look at that. And we said, we're going to do away with that entire system. Instead, we're going to teach our staff and our volunteers to have conversations. And we're going to look at our own bias. The biggest thing that people used as a marker for whether a person passed or failed was a gut feeling. And I just want to share, because I know, because I've had those gut feelings before, if I check in with myself, it's usually rooted in some kind of stereotype or bias or like discomfort that I have with the situation, but not necessarily rooted in fact. So instead, what we started doing is trusting people and saying, we're going to give you all of the information that we know about this animal and tell us about what you're looking for. And there has to be really now, someone has to basically say like, I'm going to eat this dog for us to deny an adoption. We really want people to be able to adopt. We want to support the bond. Even if a dog is going to live outside, we talk to them about dog houses. Yeah, so we've really done a complete 180 in a short period of time. I would say it's probably in the last 2 years. I have lots more to say. I want to make sure that I give Alex plenty of time to speak. I also just have to say, Alex and her organization are groundbreaking. I had the honor of being able to go and volunteer with the program and visit and meet some of the program participants at the Lancaster prison. And it was really revolutionary and changed my life and my experience. So yeah, thank you, Alex, for joining on this call as well.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
should I go or are you going to do it?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say thank you, Allison, for sharing. And I know that I heard a lot of my own story in what you were sharing with starting, in the early 2000s and then coming up and changing and your biases. And it sounds like you had a great support and mentorship in your early career. And then now you've brought that on and brought it into your organization in LA. So you've said a lot of great things that I took notes on. And when we get into the Q&A, I think we've got some great starting points. But yeah, please, Alex, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Thank you. So Paws for Life obviously is a non-profit dog rescue organization, and we thank you, Alison, for your lovely words also. So we started off in Lancaster Prison and right next door to the Lancaster shelter. And so our first round, actually, the guys handmade dog corunda beds, and we took 50 of them over to the shelter. This was in 2014. They made them out of piping, of plumbing piping and sheets and stuff. It was great. So we started that program and then eventually grew, and we expanded the program into training service dogs for veterans of war. And then, you know, just recently we started a fire first responder program for firefighters and first responders, because we realized that they were out on really hardcore jobs every day and their PTSD was so real, and they really needed that dog that lived in the firehouse that was a therapy dog for them. So we started that. And then a weird thing happened because we went into Lancaster. It was a maximum security prison and people were not getting released. They were in for life. It was great. We had these trainers, we could train them. They were there for life. We were set. And then Governor Brown started to commute our guys after serving 25 years, 30 years, and the guys started to get out of prison. And for us, it was like, what do we do after? What do we do with these guys? They need somewhere to go. They need a place where they can work. So we recently, with the thanks to best friends in LA City, we were given a piece of property that belongs to the city, and we built a people and pet innovation center. So what it does, it's a re-entry program that we hire our guys. We also take on mentors that come out of prison that get paid by the city for 12 weeks to mentor with us. And we train dogs and offer socialization classes for free to anyone in the community that owns a dog, regardless of their background, their work. If you know, we run on hours that are going to be offset to when people have to go to work. So we launch that next week, next Monday actually. So that opens to the public, and it's open 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And it's, you know, it's an appointment based at the moment, but we are there. But the other thing that we do as well, we're inclusive of other rescues. So we have a program. When I was going to the shelter, when when LA became a no-kill initiative, I was seeing dogs that were sitting at the shelter for 18 months at a time. And we couldn't, and the behavior that they developed was, you couldn't really adopt that dog out, you know, after sitting in that run. And it was through no fault of the shelter, of anything. It was just the situation with this dog. So we started a program where if anyone went to the shelter and saw a dog that they liked, we offered free 6-week board and train at the prison. So people now can go, they can get a dog, the dog goes home for 10 days, and we train that dog for free. And the first year we put 119, mainly pit bulls, through the program. This year we're heading up to about 175. So, and that's including the dogs that we put in. So it's just, you know, including the dogs. It's so hard for rescues to take dogs that have issues and hold on to them and try and find them homes. It's so much easier for us to train these dogs and they're automatically going out to the public, and not to hold on to that dog. It enables us to push more dogs through a training program. So our goal is not to own any dogs, you know, to own the service dogs and that's it, and to train up to 1,200 dogs a year, and then be that wraparound service for the public and totally be there for the life of the dog. And that, I think, is the way we have to go, because I think, you know, and we do this for rescues because we know the rescues are the boots on the ground, going in, getting these dogs. So we'll train their dogs for free as well. Those dogs can go to prison for free as well. There's no charge. So we think if we can move these dogs faster, it's a lot. We can get to the root of the dogs that are sitting at the shelter for longer periods, and then just have a flow of length of stay for the shelters. So So it's, you know, we want to give this program, the blueprint of this program, to anyone who wants to start it and has the ability to start it and has the funding, because it does take funding, sadly. But, you know, we're happy, we're transparent to share what we're doing with absolutely everyone. So yeah, that's what we do. Oh, the other thing is, I want to say, so Allison, you said about when you first got into rescue, and, you know, you had a list of things that people, you know, you have to do the home check. So when Found Animals got the chips for LA City, and they were Found Animal chips, and I was with the rescue at the time when they were like, oh my God, we cannot be we cannot use Found Animals chips because we cannot be the, you know, the first person on the contact. It transfers to the owner, as it rightfully should, because they're responsible for that dog. And so when I started my rescue, it's like the easiest chip to use in the world and the platform that they have. And I was like, oh my God, it's so great that we all get contacted, you know? And it was just like that hurdle of, we have to own this dog for the life of the dog. And it was, you know, it was just like it was almost like a judgment where people were not responsible enough to be on a chip of a dog that they owned and took care of. So yeah, same experiences.
Thank you so much for sharing, Alex. And Wendy dropped the link to Paws for Life K9 in the chat. So folks, you can see more about the great work Alex and her team are doing. Before we move on and start talking to questions, Alex, I was wondering, so everything you said, I'm like, okay, were you like, did you just come into this work open-minded with no biases? Because you didn't
No,
have,
don't be
like...
silly. No, I judged. Listen, I went into the prison for dogs. I didn't go in for humans.
Right.
And so, you know, my thing was, and the guys still tell me this, when you got up at the first graduation, you only spoke about the dogs. You didn't speak about people. And so now when people come in, like Allison, like there's a bunch of people on here that have been into the prison, and we say to them, you're going to forget about the dogs, because it's the human connection and it's what these people are doing inside that are truly giving back to the community. You know, it's all about the people, and it's getting people to be non-judgmental. We have people that call us and say, are they going to abuse our dogs? Are they no, they're not. They're going to absolutely give more attention and care than we actually give our own dogs, you know? So it's remarkable, the human connection that this program and many other dog programs that are in prisons have with inmates that are incarcerated, because it's all black and gray in there. There's no color. Everyone's dressed in blue. It's the strangest thing. There's no flowers. There's no grass. It's concrete. So this dog brings life and non-judgment, and it brings energy into that situation that it gives guys hope that they're doing something good, and they get the reaction instantly from a dog. So they make me non-judgmental, you know, like I have to be.
It's almost like you can see how the dogs are reacting to the people. And it's like, well, if you're doing this for, you know, if you came into this for the dogs, like I'm sure so many of us did, and they're reacting to the people, it's like, well, how could you not, right? Yeah. But I think it's also really important to acknowledge that both of you work with populations that we have excluded a lot of times from animal welfare, and populations that many of the general public and, you know, we have biases against people who don't have access to secure homes, people who are incarcerated. And then going back to what you mentioned first, Allison, people who are under the influence of something, you know, substances. And there was a great comment in the chat from Anna, I believe, who said that they have volunteers at their organization whose animals were instrumental in helping them overcome substance abuse, and having that non-judgmental presence and someone else to be accountable for, someone that they're caring for, which I think kind of translates to what you were saying, Alex, about the prison system too. Having, you know, something else in your life that you're living for can really help whatever it is you're trying to overcome. come. So it's awesome how without even trying, we've kind of made this whole thing come full circle. And then Emily's saying, and this is my favorite one too, when people say, I work with animals because I hate people. It's like when you're interviewing someone or someone comes in and that's what you say, you're like, okay, well, let's talk about this. This is not an automatic, you get to work here because you hate people. And now we're having a conversation in the chat about those are, you know, some of the worst words we can say in an animal services, because again, we're doing this for the people. We can't do it without the people, and we can't help animals without helping people too. So,
Hey, Amber, I just wanted to jump in because it
Of
just
course.
so, with what Alex was sharing about, and I think I would just encourage everyone also to learn more about the current state of our criminal justice system and our corrections and the privatization around it, and really how disproportionately Black and Brown communities are impacted in the criminal justice system. And for me, when I went and I don't remember the dogs that were there, to be honest. I remember the men that I spoke to, and they wanted to talk and shared their stories with us. And I remember so vividly that so many of them went in when they were 17, 18, and something like seemingly minor. And it was maybe the 3 strikes law. They had been in there for 20 years, 25 years. And I don't know about anybody else, but I had a very troubled adolescence. And my life could have gone in a very different direction. And it didn't. I didn't have interaction with the criminal justice system. And a lot of it is because I came from a family that had means, and I'm also a light-skinned Latina. So I didn't have that. So it really was eye-opening to see how systemic systems have really put people in places. And what I love about Alex's work is that she's now giving folks opportunities. She has these people who are trainers, they're expert trainers that she's now hiring into the community. And it's just, to me, that is just such an example of open arms and of letting go of old ideas and really looking at the whole picture.
Oh, thank you, Allison.
and I mean, what is service that the community needs too, right? Like how many times is anyone on this call met with someone who's struggling and needs training for their animal, or needs, you know, someone who understands animal behavior training methods so they can, you know, the general public can use. And I think, Allison, the point about having, I mean, we need a whole other call, right? About like the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
So I'd love to have both of you back to do that. Allison on our team and Wendy, let's put that together, have like a, you know, criminal justice, prison pipeline, all those things to talk about, right? And Wendy also just shared a documentary 13th in the chat too. So Alex or Allison, did you have anything else that you wanted to say, and then, or you know, about personal change, organizational change, anything like that? Or are we ready to open it up for questions?
I'm ready. Thank you, Allison.
I'm ready. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you both. So everyone on the call, you are welcome to type your questions into the chat. If you also just want to unmute yourself and jump in and, you know, just say, hi, I'm Melanie, and I'd like to ask a question. We'll definitely try and get to everyone, but I'd like to kick it off with a question for you, Allison. You had said in the beginning about you had to come in and look about who are we benefiting. And then you mentioned the bully breeds specifically and opening that up and loosening some of the restrictions. I just wanted to kick it back to you and say, after you did that, who benefited? How did that work out for you?
Yeah, so I think that's the amazing part, is that it's not just, because sometimes it's like, well, we're in animal welfare. Why are we talking about people so much? Why are we talking about inclusivity? But when you really look at who it benefits, everyone does. And the animals too. And when we looked at our more restrictive policies, dogs were staying in our kennels longer, right? So longer length of stay. Sometimes we had to euthanize, and rescue groups were getting filled. So yeah, we weren't really benefiting the animals, which had been our initial task. And I think sometimes too, that's why I say like the unintended consequences. It's like, well, we're really worried about what's going to happen to these animals when they're placed in a home. But are we looking at what's currently happening to them? You know, they're staying in the kennel. And I also have to say, building on that, we not only had to look at our adoption policies, but we had to look at our intake and owner surrender and trying to partner with the community. And so this past year, we also started a voucher program that's been funded by the ASPCA and our own Animal Care Foundation to keep pets in homes. So especially just hearing about, you know, maybe it's an under-socialized animal. If they already have a home and they have someone who's connected to them, let's do everything we can to keep that pet with their owner, whether it's connecting them to training, whether it's, you know, temporary boarding. We work with unhoused pet owners, whatever it is, let's work on a solution, whether they just need grooming and a crate so that they can stay at a relative's house. So yeah, I think it's a combination, and the return to owner piece and the return to home. I know Gina is such a huge proponent of that, but let's get that pet back home. We don't want them if they already have a connection.
That's awesome. Thanks, Allison. I think I saw Gina's eyes spark up when you said something about they already have people. And also when we were talking about found animals and how the microchips work earlier, I think that was a nice, yeah, Gina's on board with that too. So I do have something in the chat. So Emily Roberts, not a question, but how you helped remove biases from your adoption application. If Emily, you'd like to unmute and go ahead and tell us. Oh, hi, Emily. Now I see you on my screen.
Hi, thanks for letting me share. My name's Emily. My pronouns are she, her. And I had a meeting with my staff when I thought there was some unrecognized bias that was preventing us from sending more animals home. And one of the little exercises that I did is I had 3 potential adopters looking at 3 of our animals, and just very quick on paper, you know, this person doesn't have a yard, they live in a small apartment, they're a first-time dog owner, they don't know if they can afford the medications, her daily, you know, skin medications. Would you adopt, yes or no? And just real matter of fact and going on gut feeling. And I tallied up everyone's votes and we sat down, we talked about it, you know, I wouldn't adopt or I would adopt. And what they didn't know, and what I told them at the very end, was the first adopter is me, and the second 2 adopters are your coworkers, who I asked ahead of time if I could share their story. And I said, you know, you might have denied me a dog. You know, I've worked in animal care for years and years, and you all know my dog and that I take excellent care of her. But when I first got her, you know, I was a first-time dog owner. I lived in an apartment that didn't allow pit bulls, and she's a bully breed, and just a lot of different factors. You know, me and my partner, we both work 8 hours a day, and she had to be left home alone. And so that was a really fun little eye opener for everyone, I think. And it was a good way for the staff to see where they might be holding biases, and it helped move the conversation to more conversational based adoptions rather than just denying based off a single answer.
It's very sneaky, Emily. And sometimes I think it's okay to be sneaky, right? In that point. So, and I'm sure a lot of us have seen the ASPCA and CARE have the video of discluding adopters. CARE has a really powerful video. I'll see if I can put that in the chat, where it starts with a field full of people who are animal welfare workers or volunteers, I believe. And then as they call out the qualifications, like Emily was mentioning, working, housing, all that, people leave the field and the pool becomes smaller and smaller. And I definitely was a person who at a very young age went into an animal shelter to adopt a cat and got denied immediately, you know. So yeah, and we all work in animal welfare, so we're all working crazy hours. none of us are in this for the money. So none of us are making tons of money either, right? And then also a lot of us having other pets too. So that's great, Emily. Thanks for sharing. And I would encourage everyone to, be really honest with their leadership about that too, and maybe even a little sneaky if you need to be. Oh, great. And thanks for sharing that sample application too, Emily. There was a question from Gina about shifting the culture. So Allison, about how you were able to shift the culture in LA to be more open and to let go of those old biases, especially if you had long-term volunteers, who had been there for a while, who might have done things differently again in 2000 or 2010, a lot of years have passed. And then Alex, if you had anything, again, because you're working in a population where people may come in with biases, if you want to share about that too. But Allison, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question. So it takes time for sure. I have to give a huge shout out to our director, Marsha Mayetta, who has really embraced this. So I think, having executive leadership is key. But we also really had to find the informal leaders, because of course we have managers, we have supervisors, but there are people who are volunteers, who are staff, who people go to and look to, right? And if they're not on board, I don't think we would have been able to move that forward. And I think it really took a lot of different forums. It took a lot of one-on-one conversations. It took town halls that we've done with staff and volunteers. I think people want to be heard. So we also made a space for people to really voice those concerns. We also brought in, UC Davis has been incredible to us. Dr. Cynthia Karsten has come and talked to volunteers. She just has a really great, engaging way. So big shout out to them. And I do actually have to say, you're not going to convince everybody. And there are definitely people who are not on board. And at some point we've had to say, okay, this is the way we're moving forward. And if you're not on board with that, then maybe, it's time to look at a different place. But giving them the same opportunity to understand and to be heard, I think is really, really important. And there's like legitimate stuff under there. And I think it helps too, to talk about personal journeys. But yeah, I think executive leadership has to be on board, find the informal leaders, and provide really different avenues and messengers. It couldn't just always be deputy director saying it. It had to be staff as well, talking about it.
Yeah, I think, you got to practice what you preach, and I think for us, educating our volunteers on, we had a dog that went through the shelter program, came into the prison. He was 9 years old. He was adopted from LA Animal Services. And the lady adopted him. He was not dog social. And she had a Maltese in the house. And the dog was an outdoor dog. And so our volunteers begged us to take this dog from this lady. And I was like, absolutely not. What we'll do, we'll buy the dog a heated dog house. We'll put a patch of grass in and we'll put shading. And to this day, she still comes for dog food, for glucosamine, and we provide that to her because we can. I'm not saying everyone should do this, but we people donate money for causes like that. So it's quite easy to put a picture of a dog and say, can you buy a dog house? So, it's educating our volunteers who, even John, who works for us, who did 15 years in prison, called me last week and said, oh my God, you would never have adopted to these people if you would have just seen them. They showed up at the prison. He said they came like, they were on meth. He said, I then went outside. They were an older couple. He said they had a brand new Lexus. They live on 20 acres. They own a farm. It's the most amazing home for the dog. Is John, who's been in prison, judging people coming to get the dog. I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And they're great people just because of the way they looked and the way they spoke. It was like instant judgment by John. So I think for us, it's like, you know, 1-bedroom apartments. I was exactly there with my pit bull. I begged my landlord to let me adopt this boxer. That was a pit bull, you know. So, and it's like, if you live in an apartment, you walk your dog more. That's the bonus of people who live in apartments. Someone says, I live in a single. Most of New Yorkers live in singles and they walk their dogs. It's always looking for that answer that's on the positive note instead of a negative. I think when you're, you know, when you're letting go of these barriers from having people adopt dogs. And then the other side is, why do we want to hold on to the dog? Like, what's the point of holding on to this dog? You know, when a person can give it a perfectly good home, regardless of their background, their income, or whether they go to work all day, you know? So I'm gone 14 hours a day from my dogs.
Oh, I would imagine
Yeah.
most people on this call are working that much too, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, how many of us in animal welfare have second jobs too, right? Whether it's related to the field or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also just wanted to touch on what Allison said, because I love this idea. And I feel like this came up a lot when I worked in animal shelters too, is the idea of informal leaders and having it come not just from the head, because every department, every volunteer group has their leader, right? Whether that person is self-appointed, appointed by the group, or appointed by the organization. And you do have to get those people on board to walk the walk too. I love the idea of who is that feral cat leader? Who is that, you know, foster leader? Who is that adoption coordinator leader? Definitely. So let's switch subjects a little bit. We got a good question from Marilyn that I think kind of switches it. And that is, how do we demonstrate inclusivity, excuse me, during adoptions? Like, what happens when potential adopters or customers, whether they're foster parents, say that we're not being inclusive and we're trying really hard? So Allison, if you have anything that you'd like to talk about that.
I want to make sure I understand the question. So when someone says we're not being inclusive, I think we have to really listen, if that's what the question is. If someone comes and says, hey, I'm feeling excluded for this reason, or hey, listen, you know, the person who is having the experience is who should guide it. And, you know, I think something, just to be perfectly frank, that we have to recognize too is even approach. And I think, you know, the disparities that actually exist. And just to quote this really briefly, but they have found in public health that Black women are have higher infant mortality rates and are less often to be heard when they describe pain or complications during pregnancy and childbirth. And this is across socioeconomic and education. So even Black women who have master's degrees, when it's compared to white women who don't have formal education, it's so disproportionate. So I think we really have to recognize that it's everywhere, this institutional racism that happens. So I think we have to be really awake to it and ask ourselves those questions. So I think having private conversations with staff members, I would never do something publicly, you know, but pulling them aside afterwards, going over something. And I think that there's a way to be, to have a conversation about what's really going on.
And I think that's so important too, because everyone's reality is different, right? Like, your reality is not my reality, is not an adopter's reality. So if someone says, I feel that this is being exclusive, or I feel that, you know, there are biases against me, or whatever someone may come, I do think that's great to have that conversation with them and see really what their reality is, and then go from there. Definitely. Alex, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I mean, I solely agree, you know, wholeheartedly with what Allison's saying. I mean, you know, you're gonna come across it regardless, you know, and I think it's how you deal with things and the message that you put out there, which is so important. And just, you know, stick to your guns on how you want your organization to run, you know, and integrity and fairness and inclusivity. I mean, it, you know, it's like, I look at our board of directors and it's the whitest board of directors you've ever seen in your life. And I know we've got to change that, you know, and especially with the programs that we run, it's like, how can we have this? I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm like, oh my God. So, you know, I'm guilty of some of the, you know, a tiny part of that with just look at my board, a great board of directors, but I need to have diversity on my board. Our organization is so diverse, but I can see where we need to change and add and get input from people that aren't just lawyers and, you know, really have something to give to us. So, yeah.
Well, and as your former trainers and people who are participants in your program, as they get out of the prison system, get those folks on,
Oh,
right?
we get, yeah, I know.
With John.
But that top level is like, you know, we need to get them up there. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a pool of people to pull
Yeah.
from, right? That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, I'm kind of all over the place, but I think this is another really good one. So adoption fees. This is another way that we can put up barriers, right? That we don't really think of. And, you know, this says, I was always taught the adoption fee protects the animal and it can help fund the rescue. And Allison, I don't know if you have any experience with this, if you're ever able to do no fees or sliding fees. You know, certain adopters or certain animals get no fees, however you do that. But that's a tough one too, right? Because we do have to bring in some income, but we also, you know, want everyone to be able to have a pet.
Yeah, so great topic. I think somebody
Yeah.
put in the chat the study that was done about adoption fees and related to actual care of animals and people's connection to animals. I mean, think about it. I got my first cat from a neighbor. We didn't pay any money for it, right? Another one of our dogs was given to us. So really, there's so many instances where people don't pay for animals and still continue to keep them. So that's one thing. The other thing is, many of you know this, but adoption fees, you're not going to break even or make money. You're just really not, you know, and especially when you look at it compared to housing costs. So it's like, okay, if someone can't pay that adoption fee, we then hold that dog or cat for 10 more days. How much have we just spent in those 10 days of caring for that animal while they're in shelter? Just figure out a way for them to adopt. So, but the reality also, I work for a county, and so we do have to bring in revenue. So reach out to organizations. We've gotten subsidized. We're able to do lower fees. We've definitely done waived fees. I don't even like to call them free because it's like they're being paid for. The other thing is that we tell our staff, like, work with people. If that's the barrier to this animal going home, what can they pay? Let's work. Or is there something else that we can knock off to make it more accessible to them? We don't know what somebody's going through. I mean, you know, there are times where I just have a lot of bills and I just don't have a lot of, you know, expendable cash.
You just bought that house, right?
Exactly. We just got hit with this big tax bill. So it's like, my cash flow is not so much right now. I'm still going to be a great home to a pet. But yes, look at the studies. Think about how long you're housing these animals. You're going to end up spending that money and more. And people get pets. We're not the number one source for where people get their pets. It's mostly family members, neighbors, communities. So our mantra is just help them get the pet.
Yeah, I think during COVID, we didn't charge any adoption fees to anybody, and we delivered those dogs. We dropped them off outside. No one wanted to leave the homes. We actually took, I think we did 376 dogs that year. which was a record number for us, plus the trained dogs that went in. So, and we did not charge. If it was COVID, no one was working, so all the dogs were free. And we supplied crates and everything else. When we delivered, we had 2 vans, we dropped the dogs, and that was it. And, and then there was the whole thing of everyone's going to return the dogs once they go back to work. And I have to say, we had 1 return, and it wasn't because, the person had to go back to work. It was because of something else. So I think, I think for us and the way we're thinking right now, that everyone thinks, the shelter is a place where a dog should be or an animal should be. And it's not. It's like a shelter is there and it's not supposed to be full. And so, people will like open up the shelters and get those animals in, and then what? And then what are we going to do? And it's like, no, I think no one has given their dogs up because they have to go back to work. So, I think COVID in a way was really good for the animals getting out of the shelters. I wish it could continue that way, where people, we're really into getting animals and clearing out these shelters instead of just having an easy way to drop the dog off. I love the appointment system. I think, they get more time with someone who knows something about that dog, rather than just walking in, picking a dog and taking a dog out. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we saw so much change with COVID. So it's nice to see those positive changes that came out of it too. And on the subject of fees, we've got Sarah Rosenberg, who's saying some great stuff in the chat. Sarah, are you able to unmute? Do you want to just say a little bit about what you said in the chat about using the waived adoption fee or the donation-based adoption fee to make a point about people of all income being able to have animals?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to do that.
Oh, hi, Sarah. There you are. I see you
Hi.
on my screen now.
Hi.
I love your glasses.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So the idea, I find that anytime we can find an intersectional point, we can work smarter and not harder. So when we are looking at people in situations like incarcerated and Black and living in poverty, that's a very intersectional experience, right? And so when we can work with people or with beings who have intersectional experiences and start to unpack that for them, we do a lot of work in a very small space. So the idea for me around what I was putting out here on the chat is that we have the capacity here to not only remove a barrier, a financial barrier for people who have love to give, who have a home to give it from, or who may not have home to give it from. I mean, we don't even have to put that condition on there, but who have love to give and want to share it with an animal, but may not have whatever the adoption fee is. It may just be they might not have that much money right now, or they may not have that much money at all. But whatever that fee is, as arbitrary as it may be when we set it, may not be arbitrary for the people who are having to pay it. And so to remove the barrier that we unknowingly place in the fee, but then also to let people know what we're doing and why. Because if we're just coming to this knowledge and understanding, and we've been in animal welfare for such a long time, anybody else who's coming in to adopt is probably also has their own predisposed ideas about who a good adopter is and what a good home is. And if we can inform, I don't want to say educate, but if we can inform from our perspective what we've learned and why we're doing what we're doing, that it's very purposeful and mindful, and we can inform and advocate at the same time for the people who are coming in and adopting pets without the ability to pay those fees, we can be doing a lot of things at one time. And it's almost like a what are those things called? A blind auction or a silent auction, where you just go in and pay what you can, or pay what you feel. If you can pay, I mean, drop something in the bucket, we're not going to look, because we want to invite people to love and join with animals, and we don't want money to be a barrier. So just to kind of share that around in all the ways that we can and be very purposeful and inform people why we're doing what we're doing.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. And you've got a lot of love in the chat, which is why I thought it would be great for you to come in and say it in your own words rather than me try and, gunk it up. And so Gina is nominating you for president. So Gina, I think you'll have to be her running mate. And then you both have my vote. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I just wanted to end on one that kind of goes back to the huddle that we had earlier this week about trauma-enforced decision-making. And so this is a question for both you, Allison and Alex, about any tips for getting rid of those old biases, right? Like those biases exist for a reason. You had a bad experience. We've all had terrible experiences. We've seen terrible things happen to animals. We've seen terrible things happen to people. How do you overcome that and realize that is the exception and not the rule? And just because one person might have done something bad to an animal doesn't mean that that person represents whatever their group is. So just some ways that you kind of check your gut and tell your gut, no, you're being wrong, and check your biases and be more open. Alex, especially. Yeah, sorry, I muted myself.
All right.
But
yeah, I mean, I think, listen, to me, it's about the dogs going into a home, for us. And I think anyone who walks up, regardless of the walk of life, again, it all stems back to the prison and the backgrounds of the men that we're working with in the prison. Who are we to judge anyone on the outside, and their lifestyle and the way they live? I mean, I think I wouldn't get a dog now if I filled in an application with some rescues with the life, with the hours gone, 7 days a week. I'm pretty sure they would refuse me. So, and I always think that people who've never owned a certain breed of a dog, it's great because they're coming in as a virgin and you can teach them, as they go along, it's that fresh information and not this judgment of this is how I do it, So, I mean, we are a free-for-all on who wants there's too many dogs to refuse people an adoption, It's like, you need to get these animals out. So, I mean, who are we to judge people? Who gave us that rule? So I don't think, we have that right to sit there. Obviously, we want a safe environment for the dog, but I've never come across anyone yet that hasn't given us a safe environment for any of the dogs that they've applied for. So, and I always give them that opportunity. We're always approachable, we're always there to give advice. If you need to give that dog back, bring it back. No, people go through things in life. And we don't want to have them to think that they can't return that dog to us. It's not a bad thing. We're not going to shame them for returning a dog. So I think give them these choices that we're there for them, and if they need us. And we're not going to be checking in every 5 minutes either. It's down to them to check in with us if they need help. So
I love that. Thank you, Alex. And Allison, any last words about checking your gut and letting go of those biases? Because we know we have them, right?
Yeah, do the work. I mean, I have to do it constantly. It just happened the other day. I saw 2 people drive up and it was like, and I was like, oh, what's going on right now? I'm having a reaction to their skin color. I'm having a reaction to the way they're dressed. I'm having a reaction to naming it is so important, and so there's personal work that I have done and that continue to do. And there's also work as an industry that we need to do, and recognizing that implicit bias, systemic racism exists in every aspect of our society. It doesn't mean that we're bad people. It's just a fact. So we have to do that work as an industry as well. And this was the last thing I wanted to say, because there's 2 things. One is forever home. I think we need to blow that word up, because
I love that.
Right.
Yeah,
I've rehomed animals. Things happen. Life circumstances happen. So get rid of that. And the other piece is letting go of old ideas this is a new one for us, even people with disabilities, like, oh, someone's in a wheelchair, they can't adopt this large breed energetic dog. We don't know. Let's just trust people and help them find their pet.
I love it. And again, the chat is just going bananas. You all have such great things to say. Please join us on Maddie's Pet Forum. Allison and Alex will be there to answer your question. So definitely let's take this chat to the forum. We're all here to share resources for each other and to help each other through this trauma we've experienced so we can be better and think about who is it benefiting. It's benefiting our communities and it's benefiting our animals. It's benefiting our organizations too. Alex and Allison, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. I really hope everyone will join us next week on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time for our next huddle, which I believe Wendy is going to be with Kenny Lambert. Well, we can check it out on that'll just they make you go to our website and our forum so you can figure it out, but please continue this conversation. Thank you all so much for joining us for this challenge, and we can't wait to see you for the next huddle. Stay safe. Have a great day.
Thank you.